And just like, sorry, I just want to hit on another point. Just like you said earlier, it's important to have the right people there to do this type of assessment, to do that checklist, to grab that checklist from the FDIC or whoever the governing authority is,
Yep.
and to know how to implement MFA. Is it implemented all the way? Is it, or is it just turned on, but they can, the users can choose not to use it, right? We've run into that all the time where a setting is halfway turned on enough for somebody just looking at it, even from the insurance company, to be like, yes, that's good, but in reality, it's not on all the way.
Well, I just ran into an issue last week. Two customers, same product. It's one of the big multi-factor tool sets. And they changed something, the vendor did, relative to their default policy on this thing. So it kind of allowed users to circumvent the multi-factor. We had a specific policy for VPN users, a specific policy for admin accounts, and then there's like a global policy, and the global policy was overriding these two.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so like, so to your point, right? Periodic testing is also critical on these things, right? IT is not a do it once and forget it game. It's a do it, and then we just need to keep on top of it and evaluate, and that's the name of the game. That's the way it works.
I remember a couple of clients that we worked with. We do checks every quarter. We'd have the tickler report.
Right.
It'll come on and just be like, make sure all admin passwords are changed. Make sure that this is good.
Yep.
Nowadays, there's some automated tools for that, but yeah, it's very, very important that I think a human goes through and verifies that everything's good. The checklist is all checked off.
Yep.
Well, I want to point out too, a lot of people, they have cyber insurance, but do they have the right amount of cyber insurance? I mean, I could have $200,000 worth of cyber insurance, but if someone steals, $500,000 worth of stuff, I'm not going to get $500,000 coverage. And a lot of people think just because they say they have cyber insurance, they're good. I think that we need to talk for a minute about, if I'm a small business,
Yep.
what am I really looking at that's really practical for cyber insurance?
Well, what's your exposure, right? I mean, that's the nature of it. It's there's a lot of different ways to measure it, right? Like sometimes that could be a matter of what can be stolen, right? Sometimes it's a matter of the equipment that can be taken, removed, stolen, right? And so, to your point, and I think probably going in a full circle, it's something that we need to reevaluate frequently. It's just $100,000 for a startup cyber insurance, probably good enough, because I don't know how much you're going to get exposed, and how it just depends on your level of loss risk. We have a mature business where we're off buying heavy equipment or something like that. Well, that exposure level exponentially increases. And the thing with cyber insurance is it's not generally horribly expensive. It just sort of depends on your industry. If you're in a bank, premiums go up pretty heavily because of loss. But then, they put checks and balances in it, so then the cost of the premiums come down. But to your point, it requires a regular reevaluation, because you don't want to go buy something huge or have a large amount of money sitting in your account because you're suddenly taking on more work and not have coverage to protect yourself, kind of a deal.
Right. And I had a question. So let's say a bank is insured. Would their cost, I guess, to insure go up based on the amount of data that they kept for each customer? Or because I was just thinking here as you were going through, like, the more data you hold, the more PII and very specific data to clients or customers that you hold more, and so you're more valuable.
That's a big one in healthcare too.
Yeah.
Patient records and things like that. Yeah, because we'll go a real example. So I was working on a presentation, and it's got me dug into the IBM cost of a data breach report. So it sounds super exciting, I know. But
This is stuff I want to know, actually.
so if you look at according to the IBM Cost of Data Breach Report 2023, right now, the total cost, like an average, is 4.45 million US dollars. Now that is a global number. If you look at the United States,
Okay, I was going to say that's...
it's low. Yep. So the US is the number one cost of a data breach, and it's like $9.48 million.
That's the average?
The average. Yeah. And like in 2022 is 9.44. So it's
going up.
It's going up, right?
Inflation's. No.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because the Middle East follows at 8.07, and they went up, but then everybody else seems to, well, not everybody else. Next one behind that's Canada, and they're 5.13. So it's a really heavy arch. Kind of comes flat across and jumps the Middle East and the U.S. In all reality, it's kind of one of those things where, some of it's a matter of what can you get your hands on relative to cash money and things like that, right? And who's got the revenue sitting around, and who can you go breach into? And so, like, you tap
Well, and who makes it easy? If you have, older machines, things that aren't up to date, things that you're not maintaining, I mean, you think you're saving money because, this can make it one more year, that sort of thing. But what you're really kind of doing is opening the door a little bit, making things a little bit easier to jump in there.
Wasn't there a national airline that, like, everything came down because they didn't update from Windows XP?
Who was it that just had the outage because, like, iPads or somebody was out for a long time recently, like in the last year? Kind of the same sort of just technical bug issues, right?
Well, I think I'm all about saving money. But the deal is sometimes that maintenance is actually going to be cheaper than paying out if you have an issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a very real cost of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right. We try and put off having to spend $20, but not spending the $20, all of a sudden, it costs $1,000, right? Because, and it's the same with healthcare. It's, if you don't go to the doctor, if you don't get your teeth taken care of, if you don't watch your eyes, right? I mean, the same thing goes for IT, very real terms, right? I think in the past I've had to look at things where you're measuring kind of cost value, and some of it's soft cost, so it's like the people side of it. I go way back in my career, simple things like email filters, right? Well, we don't have to spend $5,000 on that. That's a lot of money. Okay, but your people sit here and they're exposed to all kinds of crazy stuff. And then on top of being exposed to crazy stuff, they're spending how many hours a week picking through junk and deleting it, right? And so that's a really old example. And I think that's kind of largely removed from a lot of our society at this point by a lot of tools. But server crashes. We can't run our ERP. Pick your tool that dies. What's the cost of having 100 staff standing around?
Yeah. No, I think the mail filter one is a really good example, because I saw people that would come up to me after we installed a Barracuda or whatever.
Right.
Hey, my mailbox is really empty and it's really easy to work now because I'm not getting these 10 emails that I used to get a day. You know, I'm not getting fished as much anymore. I don't have to be as weary for my email, which you should still look at your email, but they could let their guard down a little bit. They could work more. They could be more efficient, and all the company had to do was put in this inline filter.
Well, and I want to say too, I've heard you guys talk about this for years. I'm, an advocate for, I don't want to charge people for something that's unnecessary, that sort of thing. If our customers are doing well, we're doing well, right? So what I've heard you talk about for years is that people have these machines that are older, and they're going to pay you more to fix the old machines than it would be to go out and buy the brand new machine and update it. Like, they're holding on to this. And I know it bothers you when they say, you tell them and they say, no, we want to fix this machine. But I think that's also another factor in all of this, keeping yourself safe, saving yourself money, is sometimes new things are good.
Yeah. And I got a story for that, actually. And to add to that, the sooner that you do it, the sooner that you fix it, the easier it'll be.
Right.
The
Yeah.
longer that you wait, the harder
Right.
it will, and it will just get exponentially harder because things change so much from era to era. I had an accounting piece of software that was installed on a domain controller of all places.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't install anything on your domain controllers, please. And they had gone through one virtualization already, and that previous company, they just took it as was and virtualized it because they didn't want to go through the upgrade. So now it was an old piece of virtual hardware, a newer hardware, and then we came through, and that was midway through 4 years that they did that first conversion, and now it was our turn to get rid of that old hardware that they had, and it was impossible. What they ended up doing was they had to keep that machine online, and we built blocks around it to keep it as secure as possible, closed off as many ports as we could on the virtual side, but it was impossible for them to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It was there for 8 years, and I think they might still have it.
It happens on the end user side too. My dad still has Picasa, so
Yeah, that's a Google product for those who don't know the name, and it died many moons ago. So.
but he won't get rid of his computer. He doesn't like to change because his number one fear is losing Picasa. So I think, finding the new things, updating. I mean, it goes from businesses to end users. Sometimes you have a car, it's had a good run. You let go of it. You get a new one, a better one, a faster one. It's
One
not
that
always a
doesn't
bad
leak
thing.
oil.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's psychology too, right? I mean, people are afraid of change.
Yeah.
Change is big. It's scary. We have a friend who, just trying to help get off of really old platforms sitting in an office environment, and finally bit the bullet, got some new machines in there, goes to set them up, and critical piece of infrastructure will no longer work with. It's a scanner, won't plug into Windows 11. The vendor has no answer for it. There is no timeline, right? And like we've all experienced it, right? Like there's always this one thing that's just a dagger to the process, and as a result, you do that once, you do that twice, you kind of get a little gun shy on the process of making upgrades, but you have to do it. Like there's just the net result of staying the way you were is one, insecurity, and two, the machine that it was running on was just dog slow, right? So it's like somebody sitting at the desk taking 3 times as long as they should to conduct a simple process. And I'm like, there has to be an answer to this thing that makes this thing work, and we'll get there eventually. But it's like, you can't not change. It's just not even a thing anymore. You know, we're kind of all over, right? This is a very squirrel conversation. We're all just kind of everywhere. But I think that takes us down an interesting path, right? And I'm going to go there for a minute because you get into, I'll say specifically manufacturing environments. You go buy a, $1 million piece of equipment. Good chance with that amount of money, the thing has a PC-based controller on it, right? I don't know who's depreciating a piece of equipment like that over 3 years and throwing it out at the curb, right? It's just not happening. So what do we find in manufacturing environments? We find a lot of Windows XP, Windows 7, things that are by and large removed from the consumer space by Microsoft end-of-life sort of dates 10 years ago, right? I mean, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And like the machine works, it's functional, it costs too much money, it does a practical function. Physically, there's nothing wrong with this thing in order to help you run your business. However, right, it's got this very tired, very old operating system hanging on it, and the cost to remediate that is just prohibitive, right? So Denny kind of touched on it a minute ago where, we start to cordon these things off, right? We can't not have it, so we get rid of it. We can't run a business. We have to run business, otherwise we can't pay our employees, right? Like we have to be able to conduct what we're here for. But there are steps that need to be taken a lot of times to the tune of network segmentation, right?
Yep.
Additional security, scanning tools, whatever we can get on them to run.
Some sort of firewall rules.
Firewall
for them.
rules,
Yep.
yep. Access control lists, all these things. And we basically, it's Windows XP, right? This thing, you can't even really browse the internet with it anymore because they just, everything has a token and the tokens are so old, there's no way it'll fly, right? The certificates are all just invalid.